27,000 years ago, in a desert in western China, someone packed a dead man's coffin with almost 2 pounds of cannabis. The plant was still green. The man was a shaman, blue-eyed, about 45, buried with a harp, horse bridles, and enough weed to last him into the afterlife. Whoever packed that coffin wanted to make sure he didn't run out. But he wasn't the first. Go back 12,000 years. East Asia. Humans are just learning to farm. And one of the very first plants they decided to cultivate, cannabis. Think about what they were looking at. A single plant that made rope, wove into clothing, fed you, pressed into oil, and healed the sick. That's not agriculture. That's finding a Swiss Army knife growing out of the ground. One of the earliest records appears in an ancient Chinese medical text attributed to the legendary emperor Shen Nong. The prescription: cannabis for joint pain, for malaria, for a dozen other conditions. This wasn't experiment, this was medicine. From China, it moved. Merchants pushed it west along the Silk Road, through the Pamir Mountains into Central Asia. That's where the oldest smoking evidence appeared. At a burial site called Jirzangkal Cemetery, researchers opened 8 tombs from around 500 BC. Inside, wooden braziers, charred stones, residue, but not wild cannabis. Potent cannabis, selectively chosen. These people weren't taking whatever grew nearby. They were picking the strongest strains on purpose. They heated the stones, laid the plant on top, breathed in the smoke together while they buried their dead. They were hotboxing funerals 2,500 years ago. Around the same time, a Greek historian named Herodotus was traveling through Central Asia and encountered the Scythians, legendary warriors, horseback archers, serious about their smoke rituals. He watched them set up small tents, throw cannabis onto red-hot stones, and breathe in everything that rose. He wrote it down. The fumes surpassed any Greek vapor bath he'd ever experienced. The Scythians were delighted. Historians assumed he was exaggerating. Then in 1947, a Soviet archaeologist excavating frozen Siberian tombs sealed in permafrost for over 2 millennia pulled out tent frames, heated stones, and cannabis seeds, exactly what Herodotus described. In 2013, a Scythian tomb in the Caucasus Mountains produced 7 pounds of solid gold cups. Researchers tested the residue inside, cannabis and opium. Ancient warriors were mixing substances out of gold 2,400 years ago. Then Israel, 2020. Altars from a 2,700-year-old shrine in the ancient kingdom of Judah. One altar, frankincense. The other, cannabis, mixed deliberately with animal dung to slow the burn and maximize smoke release. Whoever prepared that altar knew exactly what they were doing. Every civilization that encountered this plant found a reason to keep it, because your body was already built for it before you ever touched it. You naturally produce a molecule called an andamide, named from the Sanskrit word for bliss. Cannabis produces a chemical that fits the exact same receptor, not a forced entry, a spare key to a lock your body already had, which explains India. India didn't just use cannabis, it worshipped it. The Atharvaveda, one of Hinduism's oldest sacred texts, lists it among 5 sacred plants. Lord Shiva is called the Lord of Bhang, a drink of cannabis leaves and milk. The myth says after he absorbed a cosmic poison that threatened existence itself, Bhang restored his calm. People still make that same drink during Holi and Shivaratri, nearly 3,000 years later. Same recipe. In China, around 200 AD, a physician named Hua Tuo mixed cannabis with wine and used it as surgical anesthesia. His patients felt nothing. In Central Africa, a warlike tribe discovered the plant and did something no one expected. They stopped fighting. They reorganized their entire society around it, renamed themselves the Bena Riamba, sons of hemp, called their territory Lubuku, meaning friendship. Their greeting became Moyo, one word meaning both hemp and life simultaneously, because to them there was no difference. And here's the question you actually came here for. Why are you addicted to everything? Your phone, processed food, scrolling at 2 a.m. The answer is sitting right inside every story you've just heard. It's coming. But before that, you should know that by the time European colonizers arrived in the Americas, cannabis had already been a foundational crop in Europe for centuries. It made the rope, the rigging, the sails. The age of exploration was partially held together by hemp fiber. Settlers brought cultivation to the New World, not as ideology, as infrastructure. It spread fast, but tobacco was more profitable. Farmers kept choosing money, so the Virginia Assembly stopped asking nicely and passed a law making hemp cultivation mandatory. For 2 centuries, cannabis was simply part of American life. Then 1930, Harry Anslinger became head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He linked cannabis to Black Americans, Mexicans, and Filipino immigrants. He personally targeted Billie Holiday, not for drugs, but for performing Strange Fruit, a protest song about lynching that made powerful men uncomfortable. He stopped saying cannabis, started saying marijuana, because the word sounded foreign, because fear was the strategy. He compiled fabricated police reports connecting the plant to violence and psychosis. He surveyed dozens of physicians. Most said cannabis was not dangerous. He ignored them and quoted the one who agreed. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act passed. In 1970, Nixon placed it on Schedule 1, same classification as heroin. A plant cultivated since before written language was now legally one of the most dangerous substances on Earth. Nixon's own domestic policy advisor, John Ehrlichman, later confirmed the logic in a direct quote. They couldn't criminalize being against a war or being black, but they could tie cannabis to one group, heroin to the other, and arrest whoever they wanted. In 1988, the DEA's own administrative judge Francis Young reviewed all available medical evidence and formally recommended removing cannabis from Schedule 1. The DEA rejected it. Nothing changed. Cannabis has existed in human life for 12,000 years, illegal for roughly 90, less than 1% of its history. Now, the answer which all of you were waiting for. Your brain has an ancient reward system, a scoreboard built by evolution. Every time your ancestors did something that helped them survive, found food, bonded with the tribe, solved a problem, it paid them in dopamine. That was the high. That was the motivation. Cannabis fit into that system perfectly. A spare key, same lock. But here's what Dr. Randolph Nesse, founder of evolutionary medicine at Arizona State University, identified. Your ancestors used these compounds in low doses, embedded in ritual, surrounded by community, anchored in purpose. The brain never needed to build defenses. The exposure was never frequent enough or concentrated enough to damage the system. Then modernity arrived. Now you can get a pure dopamine hit every 4 seconds from a screen. Processed sugar activates the same receptors as cocaine. Slot machines run on the most addictive reward pattern behavioral science has ever documented. Your brain is running 300,000-year-old software in a world it was never designed for. Endless scrolling is a broken foraging loop. Binge eating is a broken calorie scarcity response. Every modern addiction is your ancient reward system desperately searching for the high it was promised and accepting a synthetic substitute instead. Your ancestors got high inside ritual, inside community, inside meaning. The plant arrived last after movement, sunlight, social bonding, purposeful work. You're getting hit every second, alone, without context, without purpose attached. That's not a willpower failure. That's evolutionary mismatch. That shaman in the western Chinese desert, harp, bridles, 2 pounds of cannabis sealed for 27,000 years, he didn't know about scheduling classifications or political agendas. He just knew the plant was worth keeping. And the people who loved him made sure he'd never run out.